Greetings and welcome back to FaceTime, the podcast. Well, folks, this is a very special episode and near and dear to ZZ, my co-host here. They can't see a wave, ZZ.
Oh, it's audio wave. Okay. Oh, that's an unintended pun.
ZZ and I have had many memories with this special guest, and
in this very room, which you can't see.
In this very room, my first relationship started in this very room. With Mr. Bob Johnston is our guest, if you couldn't tell by his handsome reminiscence.
Hello. Your first relationship? So this is where you met Jesus?
Hallelujah.
Mr. Bob Johnston was our radio and TV teacher at Carroll High School when we went to school.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we have been pleasured by learning from you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Lots of cool memories with you guys. As a matter of fact, we were going through my camera roll before the show, looking at some pictures and memories. And I believe in some small part, FaceTime, the podcast, was birthed
right here
from your time in this classroom. And also curious, Zach and ZZ, is it true that I'm the first adult guest on FaceTime?
Could we get a fact check on that one? I think that's true.
Our fact checker, Emily VXIGT, says true.
Oh, man.
So congratulations. You have broken a barrier, much like our first woman on the podcast. You're our first adult.
Adult man.
And I appreciate that. I appreciate that you guys, being young men, that you're willing to take on perspectives that are different than yours. Because, being in high school and college, you guys have a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience. But also I think it's important to recognize, not for everybody, including myself, that there is wisdom to be gained from older generations. And I love spending time with older and younger generations. So thanks for having me on. I hope I have something worthwhile to say. And I know that I love learning from you guys as well. So this should be a good time.
Well, obviously, we think very highly of you for being our first adult on this entire planet to share your wisdom with.
So through this microphone.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah, so Mr. J, this might be hard for you to do since a man of much wisdom and experience, but could you highlight a couple things you've done throughout your career and what brought to what you're doing right now?
Yeah, it's a long journey, and I appreciate taking time to look back on the path that I've walked. I think that's really important, especially if you are somebody who walks with the Lord. I think it's really important to look back and see the steps that you've gone through, and you can appreciate how you got to where you are. So my story is I grew up in Canton, Ohio, and attended high school at Glen Oak High School. Also famous alumni from Glen Oak High School, Marilyn Manson.
I thought you were saying you were the famous alumni.
No.
Okay.
I was going to say Marilyn Monroe.
Marilyn Manson. I'm not that old, ZZ, thank you. But then I went to the University of Akron, transferred to Huntington College, which is now Huntington University. Graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Broadcasting. My first job was at Channel 21 in Fort Wayne. It's the ABC affiliate. Worked there for 10 years. I had the opportunity to adjunct teach for 2 semesters at Huntington University, and that's what led to my job here at Carroll High School as the TV and video teacher, is all those different things that happened along the way. And when I look back, it's really easy to see how God has prepared me for each new step, and I didn't see it at the time, but in retrospect, I definitely can see I would not be here today had God not given me the opportunity to prepare for the next step. So it's important to remember that whatever you're going through, God is probably using it in ways that you don't know and can't foresee. So you just roll with it, roll with it and learn no matter what's happening. God can use it for good.
Yeah, and I think you're a great example of following God's plan, because I remember you telling us that teaching wasn't what you were intending when you were going to college, and now you're here and you've been such a blessing to so many students.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's not me. It's definitely not me that's the blessing. It's the one who speaks through me. I went to Huntington. When I went to Huntington, I went there to be a youth minister, and then through many different things that happened, I transferred to broadcasting. And one of the commitments I made to God was I honestly felt a call to ministry at college. But when I switched majors, I told God, it's not my decision to leave ministry. I still want to
Yeah.
work with youth. I want to work with young adults. I just didn't know how it was going to work. And that's why I'm saying when I look back, I can see that, I have the opportunity to work with young adults, to work with youth through the avenue and the road of video and television, but it's still something that I can see God has led me to this point.
Yeah. And I think that draws like awesome insight on just like different perspectives of faith, like in a lot of different faiths, and faith isn't just like a religion, but also just like lifestyles or what you choose to live by. Like the idea that the expert on a faith is someone who's dedicated their whole life to being like a nun or a monk or something. But like this perspective is so much cooler because you can be a minister without having that degree or anything. It's through more the relationships you have every day, whether you're a doctor, RTV teacher, so I think that's something awesome for everyone here to know that like you can still, support other people around you without imposing in a way, just through your everyday jobs, careers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's everybody's job. As somebody who is a follower of Christ, I think it's everybody's job to be that minister to other people. I think a lot of times we make the mistake of saying, I really want you to get to know God, so I'm going to take you to my church, introduce you to my pastor.
Yeah.
But that's not what Jesus is asking us to do. He's asking each of us to be that pastor and minister in our own realm of life.
For sure.
And a lot of times it can be more effective, especially obviously pastors are effective, but coming from somewhere like their teacher or an influencer or a mentor where you wouldn't expect to have that Christ influence, it can just hit different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was really important, just about relationships, whether that's in the workspace, the learning space, but especially for RTV, this is a class about production. So in one way, you're teaching us how to be producers and how like the professional and technical ways of producing in a world of consuming, where we've consumed, and every producer consumes different information. So how would you, for our general audience, define the difference between a producer and a consumer in a broad sense?
Oh, wow, great question. Well, first off, we are all consumers. Even those who produce still consume, because the idea is you are always trying to get better at your craft. So imitation happens a lot in media. The producers, it used to be in the traditional sense, when I started in the media, the producers were clear. It was the TV stations, the radio stations. They had licenses from the FCC. When there was an event, you would know who the media were because they had their logos on their coats and on their microphones. But now producers are so widespread, and it's been so diversified that at high school sporting events, in talking with Dan Ginder, our athletic director, they will have radio stations and TV stations ask to be in the press box. They also there's the second tier of private industries who are looking to stream sporting events. And then beyond that, you'll have bloggers. And then beyond that, they have parents who want to Facebook Live the football game of their child playing, and they consider themselves a media outlet or a journalist and are asking for media credentials. And so you're asking a great question. I don't know where to draw the line. If you have an audience, aren't you typically considered a producer? But we are asked to make these lines in the sand between professional producers of media content and non-professional or wannabes. But that's something that I think is really revolutionizing the world, and we're trying to figure that out as we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously, cell phones, almost everybody has them. And I think just looking back over the past few years, I feel like the public overall has become really distrustful of the news. What are you thinking about that? What do you see for the future of the news? Or is it going to be more of like, you're right, it can be your source of news, people you trust, people you know, rather than someone who goes to school for a bachelor's in news.
Yeah, these are interesting days when it comes to that. Gone are the days where you would turn on the nightly news and see faces like Walter Cronkite, Peter Jennings, Tom Brokaw, and those people were considered trustworthy. Like if that person said this is what happened, people believed it and believed it unconditionally. They had this gravitas level of their journalism. But in today's world, it's so troubling to me as a journalistic teacher to see the way that the media is being collected and gathered and reported. And it's really tough now to find a journalistic outlet that you can turn on and say, these people do not have an agenda. They are not taking a side. I see it on almost every station that I check in on, that they are reporting it from a point of view. And that's not what it's supposed to be, but that's what it's turned into. And in my classes, I stress a lot that when we tell a story, like on Studio 415, that you're not supposed to pick a side. You're supposed to just give the information, tell the story, and then you're supposed to allow your audience to make up their mind and how they feel about it. But that's just not what's happening now. Like, for an example, I really don't want to get political, so I'm not taking a side on this issue other than to say, like, recently President Trump's Twitter account was shut down by Twitter. And that is Twitter taking a stand on what they believe to be true or false, rather than letting free speech happen and allowing the individual to make up their own mind. Now, Twitter would say they're doing it because they believe that the president is making insightful comments or could make insightful comments, which could be detrimental. But Twitter is not a journalistic corporation. They're not a company who claims to be unbiased. But they are still, it's a way that people consume media and get information. And we're seeing Twitter taking a side or taking a stand. So starting from news all the way down to social media, we're seeing that a point of view is being pushed or being prohibited, when really that's not the way that the First Amendment is set up to work.
And like, speaking of, like, I like that point you mentioned about the diversification of production, like how everyone has this new almost producing power, but likewise now consumers, at least for the younger generation my age, now we're looking for different outlets to receive our information, you know. So me personally, and I know a lot of my peers my age as well, we don't go to the news for our first source of what we feel is valid information. But at the same time, I don't know if the sources we are choosing are the most legitimate. Like, for example, like, we'll see a lot of our different news like through different Instagram pages, whether it's whatever side, left wing, right wing. We're starting to see a lot more students go to social media first before we turn to different outlets that are more like with more credentials. You know?
Which it's interesting too to know that Instagram or TikTok or Twitter, you're following people that you want to hear the voices from. So you're not hearing the opposing side. Yeah. Never once does the other side come up. Well, I didn't follow them. You know?
In a lot of ways that like either translates like the bias that was prevalent in some news sources and also amplifies it. So for example, though like we can compare Fox and CNN, like at the same time there's still going to be different or there's going to be similarities between the two through the same story they tell. You know, there's going to be perspectives. But once you're following an Instagram account, now you're filtering everything you receive through that account owner's beliefs, political views. So in some ways that like amplifies the amount of bias you receive in your news.
Absolutely, and that's also for me equally troubling, because from a journalistic standpoint, when you turn on a news outlet, you're supposed to be getting objective information. You're supposed to, like, for example, in my class, when a student makes a package, I encourage them to get an interview from a student on one side and get an interview from a student on the other side. We're supposed to represent both sides. But yeah, the algorithms that social media are using take you down this rabbit hole that once you click on a video of this point of view, it spoon feeds you that point of view over and over again. And it makes it extremely difficult for somebody to get balanced information
across all platforms.
And learn what the other side is thinking. And the demonization of it also. So left or right, doesn't matter. Whatever side you tend to lean to, you're never going to hear the truth or the idealism from the other side. You're going to hear the worst part about the other side on whatever issue you follow. And so to me, again, it's so troubling and it's so scary, and it's just making division greater. Instead of journalism helping people see both sides of a story, journalism and social media is pushing each of us further to the extreme.
A certain direction.
And for example, like even, on Instagram, I'll even take a harmless issue such as when the wildfires were raging in Australia. A lot of people that I follow on Instagram would post their story, and it wasn't from a reputable source about the fires in Australia. It was more of from a actor or a musician or somebody who is probably as well informed as we are on the issue, but are making a point of view on it. And when they repeat that story or share that story, it's just a headline. It's 3 or 4 words, and it's not really getting to the truth of what's happening. It's just, again, trying to inflame people.
Yeah.
A lot of times I'll say they're trying to inflame people to act and say, hey, you could donate money to help to stop the wildfires in Australia. But a lot of times it's not helpful. It's just, again, more inflammatory rhetoric or images to make people feel horrible about the decisions they're making rather than trying to inform them to enact a change.
And I see like another downside to trying to produce news through social media is that the whole lens for social media is to produce something that's like eye-catching. That's something that people are going to click on. Titles that like clickbait on YouTube, or very aesthetic pictures on Instagram. Like, though they might be well-intentioned with kind of like what you said, like there might be a good cause, like call to action, they're still trying to get your attention one way or another. And so I see like a lot of downsides to that.
Yeah, but each business has their own motive, obviously, because they want you to buy something, they want you to donate something. So, and these platforms like Twitter also have their motive because they don't want to feed you the other side, or else you're going to stop using their platform. So they have that incentive to feed you what you want. But you made a really good point about actors are this word influencer now. Musicians are influencers now. What do you think about, anyone can be an influencer.
Yeah.
A girl who can dance really well on a TikTok is now an influencer. And now she's giving you her political views. What do you think about that?
Well, first off, both of you have taken my RTV1 class as well as Grant. And you guys know that I teach a unit about the First Amendment. And so in the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, it grants us the right to freedom of speech, as well as 4 other rights in the First Amendment. So first off, I am a true supporter of the First Amendment, and I believe that the freedom of speech shall not be abridged by Congress. So I am all for people voicing their opinion. So I guess I need to say that too. Like, yes, you have Instagram, you have Snapchat, you have TikTok. If that is your platform to voice your opinion and your freedom of speech, then I support that. But I think the heart of your question is, Zach, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with influencers. But what I'm not okay with is when the public elevates influencers to the level of being objective and always conveying truth in their message, because that's not the case. Especially the word influencer on social media means typically they are being sponsored or paid by a company, a corporation, or idea to promote it. So you have to know that what they're saying is in some way backed by them being paid, rather than them as a altruistic person who wants to convey ideas to another to convince them. They're being paid to say what they're saying. So it's just something that I think, since I'm a high school teacher, I'll just say this to high schoolers: be very careful about just blindly following social media accounts and influencers, because their job is to make money. A lot of times their job is to say something controversial to get more views on their page, to get more likes, to get more chatter and comments, because ultimately that serves their purpose of increasing their platform.
Yeah.
Which was rare when the radio was coming out. They were termed shock jocks. That's why they would get it. But now everybody's a shock jock.
Absolutely.
Put your opinion out there and who cares,
Yep. There's Howard Stern, I think.
Yes,
is
Howard
one,
Stern. Yeah.
He was originally on radio, but then became so controversial he had to move to satellite TV. But literally, that's his shtick, if you will, is to be outrageous, to be whatever he can be to draw an audience and to extend his platform greater. So and he made a lot of money. For I think he probably still is making a lot of money off of the idea of being controversial.
Yeah.
Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like here's a challenge to consumers, so everyone. But I almost feel like sometimes we enjoy, or we tend to sway towards the subjective outlets of information instead of complete objectivity. I want to hear the extremes. I want to hear someone choose a side versus true, authentic, objective news. Like, could you like add anything to that? Like, as consumers, do we tend to go for that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I would say, I also want to be clear about this. Like, I love my country. I think this is a really great country. But I believe in freedom of speech so much that I believe that if somebody wants to burn and trample on the flag, that's their right to do that. I would never pass a law against that, because I believe that in the exchange of ideas, anytime we suppress one point of view, it's going to create the situation where, let me say it this way. All right, so back in the 60s, when there was a lot of racial problems in our country, if we were able to pass laws and say, African Americans, you can no longer speak about the problems you're experiencing, then that would be one form of continuing the oppression. We have to allow the minority of our country that are feeling oppressed to be able to vocalize and express the way that they are being oppressed and the way that they are being held back, so that we can have change and bring it up in a conversation. But to your question, I would say you have to be able to hear both sides of the story. You have to. Otherwise, you're going to become somebody who is, and I'm not going to say brainwashed, but you're going to be so forced into one point of view that's going to be almost impossible to get out. Like, for example, I teach journalism in this class. And so I make sure that I'm trying to stay balanced. So in my car, I have Sirius XM radio. And so I have CNN programmed in, and I have Fox News, because I want to, and I flip back and forth because I want, first off, as a teacher, I want to know what is currently being taught or being the methods of news. But at the same time, I don't want to hear just one side. I want to hear both sides, because I want to be able to check my own thoughts and say, I was thinking this way about an issue, but because I turned into this other news channel, I was able to hear the other side, and wow, maybe I need to rethink my position. So yeah, I would encourage anybody listening to this podcast to go on to whatever social media that you use and follow pages, accounts that are on the other side of the point of view of what you believe. The idea of on Facebook, you don't believe in my point of view, I'm going to unfriend you, is just creating a worse problem in our country, because you're basically saying, I am so locked into my belief on this issue, I no longer want to hear the other side. The other side is definitely wrong. There's no redeeming value. And I think that's just, it's going to make things worse in our country if you believe they could actually get worse than how they are right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like most of the people now, because they can just unfollow someone or turn off the page, they're not open or receptive to hearing the other side, even in person. I feel like people aren't good at debating, for one, or not even debating, just listening, just saying, what, I'm going to calm down and just listen, and I don't have to agree with you. I can just walk away. But it's so easy to sit behind your computer and just type whatever you want and send. You never have to see that person again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that will conclude the first part of our epic episode with Mr. J. Here's a little breaky break before we break back in with Mr. J.
Hey, welcome back to FaceTime, the podcast. We're joined alongside the handsome Bob Johnston. Thanks for tuning in.
I do have some hands.
Hey, let's go.
Thanks for tuning in. As always, we're happy you're here. And Mr. Johnston, you have worked in the news industry with 21 Alive for over a decade.
Yes.
Not 8, not 9, and not even 10, but over.
Yes. It was an awesome experience, and I get asked a lot. I don't know if you guys were going to ask this question, but I get asked a lot, would you go back and do it again and leave teaching? And I think the answer is yeah. I mean, I really enjoyed it. Absolutely, there were things I do not miss.
Yeah.
Like standing out in the cold at 2 a.m. reporting about how the snow was falling. I don't miss that. But I mean, just the opportunity to meet interesting people, to tell their story. Every day you're doing something new and something different. It was an awesome experience that I'll cherish.
Yeah, definitely. And in the first part, we kind of talked about the importance of news outlets and how that diversifies in the importance of making sure we have information out there for everyone to know what's going on in the world. But that's not all your class talks about. I know in RTV1 especially, and some in RTV2, but not as much. But you teach a lot about storytelling through all creative platforms. So we've done audio projects, we've done different shots and angle projects that all allowed each student's creativity come in. So what are some importances or maybe even differences between storytelling in general and like news?
That's a great question. And I would say that, I do emphasize the phrase storytelling. And within the context of journalism, I believe you can still tell a story, but still be factually correct.
Yeah.
So I don't want the phrase storytelling to be like you're making up something.
Right.
It's not like fictional storytelling, but it's, it's about going to somewhere, meeting somebody, collecting information, and then conveying that in an interesting story to your audience, making sure that you are objective and getting the facts correct. So, for example, in my time working at the news, we covered many different events. I covered many different events, such as when Barack Obama was running for president, he came to Fort Wayne. We covered that. I got a chance to meet him. Hillary Clinton came to Fort Wayne while she was running for president, and I got a chance to videotape her meeting and her talking to people. And Mike Pence, had a chance to meet Mike Pence, Mitt Romney.
And they all know you by name?
Absolutely
by name.
not. So, I mean, it's meeting people, but then the storytelling aspect of it is, can you take the information you've gathered and present it in an interesting way? And I think, that doesn't mean make it sensational. That doesn't mean add information to it to make it sound better than it is, but it's about the way you write your words, the way that you use your voice, the images you capture. So storytelling is such an important part of this class, no matter what we're doing. If it's an audio project, we're telling a story. If it's shots and angles project where we're just learning how to shoot video, I encourage storytelling through that. Because at the end of the day, it's all about communication. Can you convey a thought through the written word on a script? Can you convey a thought through the way you shoot the video? And I also acknowledge that most of my students are not going to go into the broadcasting field, but communication and learning how to do that effectively will serve them in no matter what they decide to do. Like, for example, graduate and start a podcast.
Ayo.
Did
Did you ever feel that you were in competition with the other news organizations? I feel like it's only enhanced now because everyone is an influencer or a news organization, because at some point you're kind of competing with the other news outlets to have them hear your story.
You're talking professionally?
Yeah.
Yeah, so here's a little industry secret.
Secret time.
Type in all caps.
So I worked for ABC, Channel 21 in town. And our biggest competition when I worked there was News Channel 15. So the secret is the reporters are very competitive, and at some point there can be friction between this is my story or, hey, this is my interview, get away.
Oh, yeah.
The photographers, this is what I did for the first time that I worked there, we all get along just like a brotherhood. I mean, if my camera dies, they'll let me borrow a battery. If their live truck is having problems, I'll go help fix it. The photographers get along great, or videographers. The reporters sometimes can be very territorial and competitive with people from the other market. So, I guess I can't give you an absolute answer. It just really is different levels have different responses to that.
I know a little bit for me, like learning from RTV1, some things I still use in my very minuscule video editing today is like how you're saying, trying to match the emotion of a certain piece. I remember in a more objective sense when we wrote scripts, like a little fact is that your B-roll or your camera shots should most of the time or try to match up what's going on in the script. But in a creative aspect, your shots can also help tell the story in its own sense, how you shoot the shot and what kind of music is underneath it, what kind of words are being sung in the lyrics. And I know for me, like whether it's a wedding video or I've done a few videos for my church, like especially the things I've learned in RTV1 still transferred and applied for me, even though I wasn't doing video in an RTV sense. So I think that's really a cool thing about this class, and especially your teaching style, that it was still applicable for me outside of the news way of production.
I think, and I love that. So thank you for saying that. And I would add to that by saying that video, obviously I'm a video teacher, so I'm biased that I think video is fantastic. But for me, I think the artistry really is illustrated when I hear a song on a radio and I'm like, that song's okay. I mean, whatever, it's okay. And then I go to YouTube and I watch the video.
Yeah.
And if that video makes me love that song because of the way that they enrich the story of the song and they add meaning and emotion to what the song already had, then for me, that's why I love video. I mean, you take an idea and a concept, and the video doesn't even have to perfectly match up to the lyrics, but it just adds so much to it that I will watch that video on loop for an hour or so because I just love the medium. I love what visuals do to enhance a thought or an idea. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Pretty powerful.
And I think one thing that I have taken away from your class as well is just the appreciation of media. I never realized how much time even just a 3-minute video takes to make, but each individual edit and shot, I mean, that takes a lot of time and there's a lot of effort behind that. And they're not just slapping that in most of the time unless the deadline's in 15 minutes, which I might be.
Or past.
Yes. Or 5 minutes.
Or 5 minutes, yes. But, there's a purpose to every single shot.
Yeah.
There
Which,
should be.
from the consuming side, we don't always see that. Like,
Right.
if you're doing your job right, you should be able to consume a video effortlessly.
Right.
Like consuming wise, versus the production, like you're very intentional with what you put where. So I think that's a really cool contrast.
And not to get too far into the weeds here on this concept, but there was an author named Marshall McLuhan who wrote a book years ago, and I can't remember what the name of the book is now, so shame on me. But the central message to his book was, wait for it, media is the message. The idea of the way that we convey information sometimes is becoming more important than what the actual message is itself. Social media, YouTube, Vimeo, TikTok, like the media is the message. The way that we are spreading information on social media now has more value or importance than the actual messages that we're sending. And Marshall McLuhan wrote that way before social media. And it's an idea that's definitely come to fruition, and I think should make us pause for a second and think about that. Like in the first half, we talked about how do people consume media or get their information, and right there, I think, is the important point.
Yeah.
Not necessarily what they're getting, but why and how are we getting information. So it's a really interesting thing to kind of contemplate and think about. And the further we go into history, or I guess forward into the future, the more that's going to become true. Like right now, there might be somebody watching or listening to this podcast who's hearing something for the first time and learning something. I know your guys' last podcast was a lot about education and learning. I mean, that's a great message to have. And if somebody's hearing that for the first time, or Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which you guys talked about, you guys, in some sense, are educating people in a non-traditional educational sense. And the media that you do that through podcasting is the value of it. It's accessible all the time. Not necessarily always what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I think, especially media has evolved alongside communication. Like prehistorically, communication was oral, it was verbal. That's how stories, traditions were passed down. And then fast forward a few millennia, we have radio, strictly audio, and then we get television, silent films, combine the two. Now we have movie industry. And then for a long time, news, as we kind of talked about, was video and audio. It was with the voiceovers, with the B-roll overlaid. And now we're in today's age where we've got YouTube, and now you're a creator inside your little 4x4 apartment, and you've got a sound booth. So how would you say, as from a consumer point of view, how should we consume media?
If you guys remember, let's see, you graduated last year, and so, right? And so
2020.
So last school year is what I mean.
Yes.
So you would have taken RTV1 3 years ago?
Wow.
Ish.
Yeah.
So there's a unit that we go through, and I'm getting back to your point. Yeah. There's a unit we go through about the history of radio and television. So now this is FaceTime podcast with co-host Bob Johnston, where I'm going to ask the questions.
Oh, no.
Do you guys remember the name of the man who broadcast the War of the Worlds radio broadcast?
Orson Welles.
My teacher heart is on fire.
I was going to say something completely wrong.
What do I get, a kiss?
Hershey's Kiss.
Yep.
Right.
Sweden.
So,
Right.
moving on. Yes, Orson Welles. So how should we consume media even back in the day in 1936 when War of the Worlds was broadcast and people were turning on their radios and believing they were turning into an absolutely trustworthy station that's going to deliver facts and unbiased journalism. They were unaware that it was a radio drama, and the radio drama was telling them that aliens were invading the East Coast, and people took it blindly and freaked out and ran for the hills, packed up their bags, and left their homes for safety.
Yeah.
This was back in 1936, where we didn't have this issue of biased journalism. So now we have it now, in my opinion, very biased journalism on both sides, no matter what channel you listen to. And so how do we consume that? Well, I think you have to always consume media now with an ounce of skepticism and cynicism. I also talk about sensationalism in my class. So when you listen to a newscast or a Twitter tweet or whatever you listen to, ask yourself a couple questions. Are they using adjectives? Are they saying things like, this is the worst president ever? Are they saying things like, I can't believe how unpatriotic the Democrats are? If you're hearing phrases like that, you have to be clued in that you're being fed a point of view.
Yeah.
You're not being given facts. You're being given opinions. And you have to be able to stop and say to yourself, is this true? Why does this source believe it's true? And is there another point of view on this subject? So, I guess that's what I would say is you be skeptical and be a cynic anytime you're on social media and you hear people talking about one point of view or the other.
Whether it's a TikTok dancer or your nightly host.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely.
Well, Mr. Johnston, we really appreciate having you on, but I want to ask, was there a favorite story that you ever covered in your time of news?
Oh, yeah. Like I said, I wasn't trying to humble brag earlier, but I've met very important people. I'll throw Peyton Manning on that list, Jerome Bettis for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
John Stamos.
Oh, I wish.
Okay.
No. Mayor Henry, mayors from all around the state, the governors. My favorite story, and I think what really emphasizes the importance of storytelling, was an old man who lived on the corner of my street. And when I would drive by his house, he would have typically a free bike on his sidewalk. It would be a bike and it'd have the word free on it. And so after weeks of driving by and seeing that, I thought, I'm going to go talk to this guy and find out what his story is. And his story was he was a World War II veteran. He served in the Pacific Ocean on an aircraft carrier. And all these years later now, his passion is to get broken bicycles donated to him. He spends his time in his garage repairing them, and then he gives them away to children in the neighborhood for free or to local
awesome.
charities. And out of all the famous people that I've had a chance to shake hands with and meet, that is my favorite story because it's so... well, first off, it's because we should be taking care of that guy.
Yeah.
Right? We owe him such a debt for his service, but he is making his life passion. At the end of his life, he's actually passed away now. But at the end of his life, his goal was to enrich other people's lives with his ability to fix bicycles. And so for me, that's
beautiful.
That's the root of storytelling. And I tell my students that, talk to people more, get out of your comfort zone, meet new people, talk to principals, talk to teachers, talk to secretaries, and find out what's going on in their lives, because there's a good chance there's a story there that hasn't been told that could impact our world, our own little small world, and make it better by telling that story to somebody else.
Yeah, and that's a great note to end on. As corrupt as media can be, it can also be beautiful and share stories. And
Definitely.
I'm really grateful for having media, even if it comes with some side
Very
effects.
grateful for a great media teacher.
Yes, and for influencers, can I call you an influencer?
No, you may not.
Okay.
On that note, hey, Mr. J, what's your favorite way to send us off?
Is there anything you would like to add?
I would like to add, thank you guys for having a passion, for fulfilling that passion and pursuing it. I know doing a podcast takes time away from your free time, your Saturdays, your Mondays, your Wednesdays. But like this right here is a great example of people who are doing it with honest intentions. And I would encourage you to continue it, and as far as you can take it. But keep telling other people's stories and sharing their stories, in a way that other people can trust, I would say.
Yeah. And with that, shop our merch line, get your parents' credit card, and go on our website. Just type it in.
sir.
Don't even think about our validation. No, I'm kidding. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for being
for listening,
on.
guys.
Really
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next time on
On
FaceTime,
FaceTime.
the podcast.
Bob time.